All right. Hey, what's up, y'all? Welcome to Lancaster 2025. Got Danny and Josh here. How's it going, Josh?
Doing good. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year to everyone listening.
Yes, sir. Yeah, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. And let's get right into it. Lots of stuff going on, of course, in the country, in the world. But yeah, let's start with Mike Johnson became the House Speaker. Was that 2 days ago they decided? Or
It was the
Friday?
third.
Yeah.
Yeah, on
Yeah.
the third.
So, yeah, some of us are not happy about that. I mean, I'm one of those people, and I don't know. There were better candidates, but I knew it was going to happen. I'm I don't have a lot to say about it. You probably have more to say, Josh. Just to
It's
throw you
just
right in there.
it's just another failure by the party that we work so hard for, but they continue to fall on the same holes. They just continue to say they're going to do one thing, the right thing, and then they just turn around and do something else. They do the exact same thing that we hope they don't do. I was hoping for someone like Jim Jordan or Byron Donalds or at least someone who like speaks America first.
Right.
But
That's
we
what we're
didn't get
about.
that. We just got another establishment guy who sent 60 billion more to Ukraine, a guy who uh, signed off on extending the FISA courts and that they can now spy on American citizens for another. I think he signed it on for like another
Right.
decade.
That's one of the worst things he did.
And he
Absolutely.
promised he wasn't going to do that too. He said, "Oh, I was against it until they brought me into this room and they showed me just how important it is." So
Wow.
the guy's he's just a liar. He works with the Democrats. He's okay with big government, and it's just a shame. It's just a shame. And I get that Trump wants him, but Trump wants him because he can control him, not because he's a good
Sure.
politician. Trump's be like, oh yeah, let's keep Mike. He wants to keep Mike because Mike's going to do whatever Trump tells him to do. And
Yeah. Yeah.
so I'm
Trump makes a lot of picks that I don't necessarily understand. And we can circle back to that because that goes for a lot of his cabinet picks. But I wanted to ask you specifically about because I am a big fan of Thomas Massie. I think he's the GOAT. I mean, he's like my litmus test. I mean, he's the most principled guy in Congress.
mhm.
And I haven't followed it closely, but I know he was against Johnson becoming the speaker too. And you might know a little more about this, but can you tell me about some of the hate he's receiving
well they're
and
calling
why that is?
well they're calling him a rhino again because he voted against Mike Johnson, who was Trump's pick.
Mm-hmm.
And this goes back to 2020. Basically, he was the only Republican. He might even been the only person to
Person
vote
in Congress
the
against
only
that
person
big
in
bill.
Congress to vote against the bill where
Yep.
which is what started this inflation. People want to
Yep.
say that, this is all Biden's inflation, but Trump signed $6.5 trillion of
Yes.
spending in in 2020. So some of the
Yep.
hurt, some of the pain that we all are feeling right now is from him as well, as from Trump. And Massey was the only one to vote against it. But
Yep.
people will call him a rhino mistakenly because he's going against Trump.
Right.
Um, but just because you go against Trump because you think you shouldn't spend any more money when we have none, that doesn't make you a rhino. What makes you a rhino is people like Mitt Romney and Lindsey Graham and
Yep.
Susan Collins and the warmongers in the Senate and in the House that are
Right.
Republicans. He's the best we have. I think
Yeah.
Dave Smith said in a tweet this weekend that if we had 535 Thomas Massies
Yep.
in Congress and in the Senate, we would not be $35 trillion in debt. But
Exactly. Yep.
but if we had 535 Mike Johnsons, we'd be exactly where we are right now.
Yep.
So
Yeah. it's the difference between, I mean, I get the concept of loyalty, but it's loyalty to principles is more important than loyalty to people and party. And that's what Massey appears to be principled in every way. Like, yeah, if your own party is wrong or your party leader, then stand up to him, you know? That's the way I'm interpreting the situation.
Yeah, and there's a lot of voters that would say, Thomas Massie is just, an idiot, and he should be, he should be taken out, he should be primaried, he should be this and that. But that's because they don't understand that Donald Trump isn't a king.
Right.
No elected House of Representative or senator has to do what the president of the United States says.
Right.
Because we live in a republic. This is a republic. The president doesn't have all the power. We have checks and balances in our system. That's why it's the greatest system, supposed to be the greatest system in the world. So, just because, Thomas Massie is a Republican, that doesn't mean he has to be lockstep with whatever our Republican president says or what the party says as well.
Right. Yeah. And he defines for me what America first. I mean, him and, Rand Paul. There's a few good others, I guess, but
Chip Roy's pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Basically the Freedom Caucus.
Right.
Basically the Freedom Caucus in the House. Those guys are pretty much America first. They're all good guys. And they want to be fiscally responsible. I think some of them are leftovers from the Tea Party movement, which brought you Ted Cruz and Rand Paul and Thomas Massie and who's the guy from Michigan? Oh my goodness!
Johnson. No.
It starts with Justin something. Justin Amash.
Oh yeah, Amash. Right.
Justin Amash was also Tea Party.
And
Amash actually was, Justin Amash voted against Trump. Actually voted, I think, to impeach Trump.
He was a big critic of Trump.
He was a big critic of Trump too, and people didn't like that as well. But fiscally and principally, liberty, he was way more principled than the rest.
It's a shame. I agree.
Yeah, and it's a shame. He actually ran, I think, to be in the primary, to be the Republican senator that went to the general election this year and got completely crushed.
Yeah. Any final thoughts about that before we circle onto a local issue? Speaking of principles and rhinos and things like that, we have some interesting politics locally in Lancaster County.
I just think anything you see in DC, the infighting, the pushing for power, the good versus the bad, that happens in all 50 states as well. It might be smaller fights or a smaller bite of the cookie of power, but in all 50 states, the tug of war of power happens in each state, and ours is going through right now.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. So right, let's go into that topic. Our local senator Ryan Aument is stepping down to work for Dave McCormick, and that leaves a vacancy. So we're going to have I guess they call it a special election coming up soon. And we're deciding amongst us local Republicans are deciding who our guy is.
Our committeemen, our local Republican committeemen.
Yeah. Just want to clarify that. Right. So we're going to be having meetings coming up, straw polls, etc., and then a county level meeting later this month. And I was glad to hear that Josh Parsons, our commissioner, is running, and he's gotten some key endorsements so far.
He's got a lot of endorsements.
Yeah, a lot. Yeah, from other Congress people, state house reps, and from Congressman Smucker too, I believe.
Mhm.
That was the biggest one.
The sheriff, Congressman Smucker,
Sheriff
our
Lepler. Yep.
sheriff, our district attorney, our other
Right.
commissioner, our other county
Yep.
commissioner, the Republican county commissioner,
Yeah.
Tom Jones, my state representative. I think it is interesting that Ryan Aument hasn't endorsed anyone, though.
Yeah.
I kind of expected him to endorse someone, but he hasn't.
That is interesting. Well, we're, maybe we can save some of this content for a future episode. We're expecting to have Josh on our show
Yeah,
sometime soon, and we look
and
forward to talking to him.
that was a complete accident. We like when we were talking about having him on the show, it was before Christmas.
Right.
And it was, like I had been talking to him since October, trying to get him on just to talk about county
The state
stuff.
of the county. Right.
So he agreed to be on, and then when we found out that he wasn't going to be, the county commissioner for much longer, we're like, oh well, he's probably not going to want to be on our podcast, but he's still going to be on our podcast, and it's probably going to be the beginning of February, is my guess.
Yeah. Yeah. It'll be sometime after we have our meeting because he's busy until then. Yeah. I mean, I support Josh because I like what he's done as commissioner. He's a strong voice. He's shown that he can be brave and standing up to taking unpopular positions amongst, this is a purple county, and he gets smeared a lot in the paper and from the Democrats. And I like his decisions. I mean, I support him, and I like that he's brave and outspoken.
Mm-hmm. 12 years of not raising the county taxes.
Yeah, that helps too.
I mean, it's great. I mean, that's great. Basically, I mean, I'm supporting Josh as well, 100%. Considering, what he's done for the county, the way he's just a vocal bulldog for, conservatives and Republicans, and I believe America first, in this county. He's the leader in the county, I think, when it comes to that. He's always going to battle against someone, right. Online. And I mean, some people say that, oh, that's not good. That's annoying. But really, like in a system of stagnation, like Harrisburg is stagnant. Nothing can really get done. You have a Democrat governor, Democrat House, a Republican Senate. It's not much legislative wise is going to get done. I mean, it took him 9 months to pass the budget last year. So I want to see in that seat a vocal bulldog, someone such as like Thomas Massie, like Chip Roy, like Rand Paul during COVID, a vocal bulldog that, isn't afraid to be like, hey, I may not be able to push the ball down the field and get this and this done, but I can at least, put their feet in the fire and speak truth and, show light on, what we need to do and what they aren't doing. So I just find that so valuable in a stagnant system that we have right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I lost my train of thought. Yeah, I mean, right. It's valuable, and we need somebody like that. But I mean, we don't know how it's going to translate from moving to commissioner to state senator, but we can kind of get an idea. I mean, based on his record as a commissioner.
Well, again, there's not a whole lot you can even do. I mean, it's 2-1. I mean, right now, you have the governor and the House 2 versus 1, the Republican Senate in Harrisburg. Not much is going to get done because of checks and balances. The same system we have at the federal level is pretty much the same system that we have at the state level. It takes the House and the Senate to agree, and then the governor has to sign it. For anything to get passed. So, I mean, I don't see too much legislation actually getting passed anyways.
Right.
So let's have that vocal bulldog. Let's have someone that's young still. Like imagine that. Let's have someone young,
Yes.
energetic, and is the right kind of Republican. The
Right.
kind of Republican that you and I want to see in office. An America first, Pennsylvania first, a
Exactly.
principled Republican.
Yeah. Now I remember what I was going to say. I mean, we're going to have him on, but we're also happy to have on other candidates. I mean, if they're still in the race a month from now. But last I heard, there's three other candidates, and I don't know who the last two are. I think they entered kind of last minute. But Brett Miller is also running for the position, and if he's still in the race a month from now, we're happy to have him. Because my
Yeah.
point is, like, I mean, we might vote one way in the committee, but you don't have to take our word for it. I mean, we'll endorse who we endorse, but we're happy to have both of them on and let them tell their side, and you guys can decide for yourselves. That was my point. I want to see me even-handed.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if Brett Miller can come on, I would absolutely love to talk to him about how he sees politics and how he sees his version of conservatism and republicanism. And it's just I think you and I both have more of a communication. Like we've talked to Josh more times than we've ever talked to Brett Miller as well.
Right.
I
Right.
mean, and also he said all the right things. And he's also way more outgoing, and he's a vocal bulldog where Brett Miller I don't think really is. It's not really his style.
Right. And we're gonna push the defend the guard bill on whoever
Oh
whoever
yeah.
gets in office. Yeah, so
Oh
we're
yeah.
still about that. Hopefully,
We
we'll
are.
get it done in PA.
It's an uphill climb with everything. With that is such an uphill climb in this state, though. It's
We should get Sergeant McKnight himself sometime on the show because I mean we can do anything remotely.
yeah,
I
we
bet
should.
I bet you he'd be a guest on this show.
I bet he
For
would
those
too.
that don't know, yeah, Sergeant Dan McKnight. He's the national head of the Defend the Guard bill, which is it's a proposed bill it's been proposed in at least 30 different states and it's made headway in the past couple of years, like past one chamber of in like three
It was
different
Arizona,
states.
Arizona
Yeah,
Senate, and the Montana House, I think.
right. So it's getting closer and closer every year to passing in at least one state, and the bill would prohibit that state's national guard from being deployed to a war zone overseas without a formal declaration of war from Congress. So we think this is an important anti-war and America First bill, and one that's literally going to defend the National Guard. So I didn't go into details when I talked to Josh, but I said, I would like to talk to your perspective as a veteran about a few foreign affairs like that. So even though, I mean, the state senator might not have a huge role in things like war, but a state senator can affect how our National Guard is deployed. So
Mhm.
I think that's a good segue. It's a good tie-in between the state and national level, and something we can do to preserve America first for all. So anyway, so Dan McKnight, I've met him a couple times. He was on. I had a Zoom meeting with Senator Scott Martin back when Scott was our senator, and we lobbied for that bill. And that's the timing wasn't great because that was right before his gubernatorial run, and he had a lot of stuff going on back then. And I did talk to Aument about this bill also, but nothing became of it. So I'm hoping our next state senator will give us a little more ears for this bill.
Well, yeah. And also let's just also like talk about that. Because Ryan Aument is out. You know, I think that kind of saves us just a little bit from some of the stuff he was been trying to push over the last couple years, such as like the runoff voting
Enough
in the
voting. Sure.
primary. He was
Yes.
trying to push, basically taking away private property from students in public schools, taking their phones away and basically making it to where the student has no way to contact their parents independently. And
Yeah.
I brought that up to him, cyber, on the computer before about it, and I didn't hear anything back. But just he was looking at a problem and was looking at a problem through what a government can do lens, and that's
Right.
not the way to look at that issue or hardly any issues. You can't use the arm of government to take away private property from kids and then also leave those kids without the safest and most independent way to reach their parents in case of a crisis at school.
Right.
Now, I understand that cell phones haven't been around for a long time, but they are here now. And the report of abuse and bullying and sexual abuse and mental abuse by teachers to students has went up in reports, mainly and primarily due to cell phones. Because kids can now document and prove and take video and recordings of misconduct. And when you take, I just don't like the idea of taking that away from kids in public school. If anything, I think there should be more transparency in public schools, because you're sending your child into a building where they can't leave, they can't go to the bathroom unless they ask. They can't, I'd rather see more transparency in schools than less. And I, for one, hope that all those ideas die with Aument out, to be honest.
Right.
And
I think we talked about that last time.
We did.
With cell phones. Yeah. And wasn't there another thing about, I think he said something that was troubling about a private-public partnership.
Yes. Fascism. That is fascism.
Yeah.
Basically boasting. It's the most egregious thing that politicians do. They do exactly what the government is not supposed to do. They take from others. They take money and resources from other people to then disperse it to other people. And so they steal and then give. Okay. They're the only ones that can do it. Robin Hood, was killed at the end of that story for doing it, so like the idea that he's going to brag about taking tax money and then funneling it to his district to quote unquote build jobs just isn't the kind of Republican I want in office. The Republican I would want in office is someone who believes in laissez-faire government. Government, stay out of my business, stay out of my pocketbook, stay out of my life, and you don't want
I think you're frozen.
Politicians trying to use tax money to as a campaign attribute. You know what I mean? Like, oh, you should reelect me because I brought so much $1 million back to our district, or I've made so many thousand more jobs back to our district. None of those jobs came organically, and I guarantee you that more jobs and more money would come back to our districts or more organically if the government would just, release regulation and leave us alone.
Right.
So I think Josh is closer to that viewpoint than not, because he hasn't raised taxes in 12 years.
12 years. Yeah. Fantastic.
Yeah. And he's been holding the line. And actually Lancaster City and, like the county itself is growing, and there's opportunity. And if taxes hasn't been raised in 12 years, I mean, it's phenomenal what's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. That might be a good segue. I did want to go into a specific local issue. I know that homelessness is on the rise. I saw on the LNP the other day, a 2024 count identified 597 people to be experiencing homeless across the county, a 13% increase from 2023.
Wow.
And 122 were found living on the streets in total. So, yeah, this has been covered, and I think there's a homeless encampment not far from my neighborhood that was kind of in the news that the mayor was gonna try to, I guess, do a sweep, and Lancaster stands up, is against that. But anyway, we were talking before we started recording about yeah, the homelessness issue. I mean, it's a whole can of worms. Like, like what's the right way to address that? And but I don't know if, yeah, to what extent is it really a local issue? I think that was the point you had made. Do you want to elaborate that? Because it's more a national and state issue, right?
Well, it's just happening everywhere.
It's happening everywhere. Yeah.
yeah, it's not unique to Lancaster County. The rise of 13% is actually modest compared to other areas.
California.
Yeah, like California. Yes, yeah, yeah. Like it's homelessness is exploding everywhere, and a lot of boomers. Sorry, boomers. A lot of boomers think it's like, oh, they just need to apply themselves, or oh, they just need to like drop the bottle or get off the drugs. And for some people, that is the case. But if you're seeing a 13% rise, and you're seeing an even higher percentages rise from state to state, that's not because more people are drinking and more people are doing drugs than ever before. Those numbers are usually pretty much even or have like an even uphill trajectory. This is because people are choosing between paying their mortgage, paying their rent, or buying food, or they're choosing between buying groceries or buying their medicine.
Yeah, it's the economy, right?
Yeah, it's the economy. And it's a horrible thing. It's terrible because, I mean, living where we are right now in Lancaster County, our grocery bill is double our mortgage, and we have
Yeah.
a pre-COVID mortgage. We're very like fortunate with the mortgage we have right now.
Oh yeah.
But like our grocery bill is double our mortgage. Like, what more do you want to say? I mean,
Right.
most people are feeling the pinch everywhere they go, and I just I pity everyone that I feel terrible for the people who are homeless right now, especially the ones who probably still have a job, or have,
Yeah,
or,
yeah.
or
A
God
lot of them
forbid,
do have jobs.
or,
Absolutely.
or God forbid their kids, are
Right.
homeless too, or maybe a man is just homeless and his mother or his wife and kids, say their wife and kids are at Water Street Missions, but Water Street Missions doesn't allow men in sometimes, right? Like, don't they take priority to women and children first at
Uh,
Water Street?
I'm not well versed in who they take.
I'm not
Maybe.
as well versed. I think that might be the case though, at least for like their mass like place where people go to stay at Water Street. That might be the case. Don't fact check me,
Yeah.
guys. I might be wrong. I volunteered
We
at
can
Water
look
Street
into
Mission.
that.
I've
Yeah.
volunteered at Water Street Mission. I thought that was the case. I could be wrong, but yeah, it's not really something that a locality can take care of,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a problem that the federal government should never try to take care of. The people who should be doing it is churches and nonprofits.
Right. Right. So here's a question. Yeah, I mean, if like the two or three people who are living under this bridge turns into, you know, 20 or 30 and it becomes a huge homelessness encampment, I mean, do does the city have should the city do something about that? If I mean, if the neighbors are complaining, or then it does become a local issue. Like, should we be working to prevent that from happening? And I guess that's one question. Or
Well,
what can we do about it without
well,
relying on government?
well. I bet you if we would ask Josh Parsons this, he probably would say, we need to contact local nonprofits. We need to contact local churches that can bring these people in, give them some assistance, and then he'll probably also say that there's many other programs such as food stamps. There's some government grants they can sign up for that can help these people get back on their feet, is what I would think, he would say. And I think that's what, probably what the mayor would say as well. You don't want homeless people, you know, especially I think you said that they're under an underpass near you.
Yeah, correct. Yep.
Is that like the 30 underpass? Like which underpass are you talking about?
It's
Oh wait.
I'll
If you don't want to give out
article.
your area.
No, I mean it's not like immediately like next to my house, but it's I'm trying to
It's not by
remember
Long's Park, is it?
it's near Ross. No, it's near Ross Street. It's I don't think you would know the area.
Okay.
It's near where this. Have you heard of the Stecky steel mill?
I think
it's
so.
yeah, it's right down the street from there.
Yeah. See,
Mm.
there's a part of me that is if they're not harming, the libertarian inside of me is screaming if they're not harming anyone,
Mhm.
the non-aggression principle, if they're not
Right.
hurting anyone, then let them be. I don't really think an eyesore is worth, uprooting what little these people have. I don't think it's worth
Right.
it. But if they're causing, traffic issues, if there's like heaven forbid there's a sickness that's getting spread by them and they're all getting sick or they're all getting sick and stuff, maybe then you could say that there's a value in getting them all off the street, and then getting them in the churches and whatnot. But to me, in non-aggression principle, my libertarian mind is like, if they're not hurting anyone.
Well, it's not like they're being locked up. I mean, I think the idea was to relocate them to some of the local shelters that have room, but I don't know all the details.
That's what they should do. Is take them to local shelters. And the problem with that is that people who are down on their luck and aren't drug addicts, aren't alcoholics, don't have mental issues, they'll take those shelters and they will utilize them and be grateful. But then you have the people who have mental problems, who are addicts. A lot of those shelters have rules, okay? And if you break their rules, you're not welcome. So a lot of shelters are, no needles, no drugs, no alcohol, no violence. And you have to abide by those rules or they'll kick you out. So that is like a little bit of that can be an issue for a certain percentage of homeless people.
Right. This is kind of going off on a tangent, but there's a recent Jimmy Dore episode where he interviews the guy from Food Not Bombs, and he works in California mainly, and I mean they have a much bigger homeless problem over there, but he goes into the kind of whole there's a government racket that is spending like millions of dollars on this affordable housing, and it's really
billions.
not solving.
In California,
billions actually.
Yeah, it's billions.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's really not solving anything. I think this rate is going up, and it's just kind of a racket because they could have spent that money in different ways, and I think it's meant to perpetuate the homelessness problem and to make money for the landlords of these quote unquote affordable housing, which just turns into market value housing after the clause runs out or something. I don't know all the details.
Yeah, I think also they're abusing the agency that they created for it. I think they've created a whole committee or whole cabinet for this is just California for fixing the homelessness problem. If you are going to incentivize people with a job to fix a problem, but then once they fix the problem, they don't have a job anymore, who in their right mind would fix the problem?
Right.
Yeah. They're like, okay, I'm going to fix this problem, and then I'm not going to have this cushy job anymore where I'm getting paid millions of dollars to, fix homelessness in California.
They played a clip of this woman who was like a homelessness czar, and she was making like $250,000 a year, and it was like, oh my gosh, so like, and she was a total fraud. Anyway, yeah.
Here in Lancaster, I mean, there's so many great churches. There's so many great community food banks. Then there's homeless shelters. There's Water Street, who has a phenomenal system, and they've been great for years and years and years. You
Yeah.
know, I think we should flex on our Christian love,
Mhm.
and help, and we should have pastors that want to help these people.
Yeah. I think my point in bringing up that story about California and the Jimmy Dore episode is there's a fine line. There are certain things. I think we have a better infrastructure here in Pennsylvania, and maybe a better culture too. Like you just mentioned, the Christianity, and I don't think any of us here want to let Pennsylvania turn into California, and that's part of why we're Republicans. That's part of our battle. So yeah, I mean, I agree with the libertarian principles you brought up. Yeah, we don't want to empower the government to go down a slippery slope of doing too much where they have this power that can be abused and counterproductive, do the exact opposite of what it's supposed to do. So that was my point.
Well, yeah, and we've been down this road before. Before, back in the early 1900s, we had insane asylums, and everyone, we got those crazy people off the streets, as to say, and there was no crazies in the streets anymore. But how were those crazies in the streets being treated? Many of them were borderline tortured for years on years and years and years, by these government ran psych wards. And, I don't know if that's a door we want the government to open up again, So our churches should step up, our nonprofits should step up, and we should, do volunteerism, which is another libertarian thing that I love so much, is where people just volunteer and do the right thing without any coercion or any force.
Yeah. Did you ever see One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest or read the book? That freaked me out. Anyway, I don't want to spoil.
What was that? I don't think I've heard of it.
One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Well, it's a famous book, and they made a movie out of it with Jack Nicholson and
the Jack Nicholson.
Jack Nicholson, the actor. Yeah. No, Jack Nicholson, the actor.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah. I think you're thinking of Jack Nicholas.
I am. I was like, oh,
that's
no.
Okay. Their names are similar. Yeah. Well, you should check that movie out. I mean, it's kind of a classic, or the book. I mean, I was too lazy to read the book, but
is it about?
It's about a mental institution. Yeah, and he's in there, and he's perfectly sane, and he's kind of a troublemaker. Well, just to spoil it for you, at the end of the movie, I mean, he gets shock treatment for no reason, because he was insolent, and they give him this shock treatment, and that was halfway through the movie, but towards the end of the movie, he turns into a vegetable because they either gave him another dose of too high treatment, or they did cut into him or lobotomize him or something. You don't really know what happens, but he comes out of it a vegetable, and
well, they would even take in non-submissive women, and their husbands would be like, she's a psycho, and the government would just be like, okay, we believe you. And they put these women in psych wards because they wouldn't fully submit to their husbands.
Yeah,
it's great. It's absolutely insane.
Yeah, it's really terrible. But my mind started going in places we could get into MK Ultra. Speaking of
no, we don't need to go into MK. Not right.
Which is a real thing, but not tonight.
It's a real thing. It's a real thing.
My point is, I'm really disturbed by the idea of messing with people's minds like they did. Anyway, yeah, we don't have to go down that road. Yeah, how did we get on that from homelessness?
I think I mentioned that some homelessness people have mental.
Oh, the mental, yeah, they used to have those, right? Yeah, so we don't want to bring those back, even though I've heard that floated around, because there's too much capacity. Anything that's government run, like a mental institution, there's capacity for things to go really awry. So yeah, we're against that. Do we want to go into another topic? Well, let's see. We're about 40 minutes into the podcast.
What was the last stuff you wanted to talk about, or what did we not talk about?
I mean, we had floated the idea of talking a little bit about LNP, how it's, it's been a couple months now since they downsize, well, not just downsizing their workforce, but they've gone to only having printed letters a couple days a week, and they've gotten rid of all of their foreign policy stuff, with the exception of when a major story breaks out, like, like the toppling of Assad in Syria. There was a story about that. They had it one day, and then there's nothing else in it because they don't do foreign policy anymore. But there was a story. I was actually emailing with the guy who did the story about there was a rally in Penn Square a few weeks ago, and there were people from Syria there who were actually celebrating the fall of Assad because I guess they had, maybe they had relatives there who had been persecuted in some capacity. But it really only gave you one side of the story, because I emailed him and I said, didn't you talk to anybody else at the rally, or people who were there who were more concerned about the regime change? And he said, yeah, I did, but some of them didn't want to be quoted. And it was a cordial email exchange. And he admitted to me that he really didn't know a lot about Middle East politics. And so my point in bringing this up is, I appreciated that feedback. My point is that I'm kind of glad that LNP doesn't cover foreign policy anymore, because all they used to do would be, give you one-sided stories that it was regurgitations from the Associated Press, which is badly corrupt. And that's a whole another can of worms. But I don't want people, if the people are going to only know one thing about Syria and all they read about it is that, I'd rather they not know anything about it. So that's my point. And maybe these are good changes for LNP, that they've limited themselves in size so people can seek news elsewhere. Now, if people go to CNN or something as an alternative, or even like the New York Times, that's not a whole lot better. I'm sorry.
No.
Any thoughts on that?
Well, I think the LNP just does what every local newspaper does, and they kind of let the national news write the story for them, and they just tweak a few things, and they, like you said, regurgitate it back out. That's why it was called the Mockingbird media. I mean, it's from top to bottom. It's all the same, and that's why we're in the landscape that we're in. We unlike LNP, unlike the Washington Post, unlike the Washington Post, the New York Times, and all of them, we're just ourselves. We have no incentive to lie. We have no incentive to, manipulate people. Really, we just want the news, And I think in a place such as Syria in the Middle East, where there's so many sides. Of course, you're going to find people who are happy to see Assad gone. You're going to find people who are upset to see Assad gone. But we all know who's the most excited, and that's Israel, that Syria is gone.
Yeah.
We know that America has been trying to take down Syria for a while, and whether we were involved in this or not,
most people don't know about Project Timber Sycamore, and I think that's important context. It started during the Obama administration, where we sent American special ops to help. It goes back to the Arab Spring, right? Like, didn't we have something to do with that? Yeah.
Yes.
Anyway, there's a whole long sordid history of American involvement in supporting terrorism in Syria to try to overthrow Assad. Well, those same terrorists are now in power, but we don't call them terrorists anymore because they work.
They're freedom fighters.
They're supposedly our allies, so we call them. Yeah.
Well,
I mean, any name but terrorist.
well, even when Trump's first term, when we were in Syria then protecting oil fields, and Trump wasn't supposed to say it out loud. He's like, we're there for the oil. We're there for the oil. And they're like, what did he just say?
Yeah, establishment got mad at him because he wasn't supposed to say that out loud.
He's like, we're there for the oil, and I just remember. Do you remember when he was like, "We're pulling our troops"? Like, I think what happened was we got in a few skirmishes with Russian soldiers, because you got to remember Russia had sent their soldiers into Syria as well to fight. Not a lot of people know this, that there's actually Americans and Russians fighting against each other on opposite sides of the battlefield. One fighting with Assad, one fighting against Assad.
Crazy. Yeah.
And it got a little hairy, and then Trump's like, okay, let's pull out. And if you remember the media freaking out,
Yeah.
when he said, "Yeah, we're gonna pull out," and then all of a sudden, all the news media was like, "You're gonna leave the Kurds to die."
Oh yeah.
Do you remember that? And then
Absolutely.
and then the rest of the Americans, sitting there in their TV, watching their TV that night, are like, "Who are the Kurds?"
Right.
Like what person sitting on their chair eating a bag of chips in America knows who the Kurds are?
Right.
Like, and the media is just like, they're leaving the Kurds to die. I'm like, you
Yeah.
don't know who that is.
It was the big thing you were supposed to be outraged about, because the media
supposed to be
said so at the
completely
time.
outraged about
Right.
these people that no one has ever heard of before.
Right.
And the craziest thing about Syria, when Trump was president, was that he ordered everyone to leave, and the Pentagon and the military industrial complex actually ignored him.
Yep.
And left and completely ignored our commander in chief, and left, and actually kept military operatives there. Absolutely insane.
Oh yeah, absolutely. They went against his wishes, and he had campaigned him on the platform of non-intervention, and I remember him talking in the debates about it with against Hillary Clinton, and she's a big interventionist, and she wanted a no-fly zone and everything, and we if you look at anyone who knows about Middle East history, recent histories particularly, Hillary Clinton also pushed for the toppling of Gaddafi in Libya, and look what happened to Libya since then. It's open slave market nation. It's in total chaos. It's been much worse ever since they lost Gaddafi. And
and let's just talk about America first for a second. In what way does the toppling of Syria, the toppling of Libya, the destruction of Yemen, the destruction of Iraq, in what way of all these Middle Eastern countries does this benefit you or me sitting at our table?
Right.
What is that? How does that impact our lives at all?
It doesn't benefit us at all.
And we spent $7 trillion on all this.
Yep.
And it's benefited no American. It's only benefited Israel.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm not trying to be. I'm not anti. I think Israel has the right to exist. I think the Jewish people have the right to exist and worship freely. But we're America first. You and I, we're America first. And we think Israel has big boy pants and they can take care of themselves. And we're $35 trillion in debt. I think that the era and the time of America just relentlessly destroying other parts of the world's regimes for some other country, I think that should be no more.
I agree.
And we were talking about the homelessness. I think Rogan talked about this several times this last year, and he really hit it home multiple times on his podcast. He said, with the money that we've sent to Ukraine alone, we could have solved homelessness in America for that price times 2. Meaning, for all the billions of dollars that we've sent, we could have put money in every single homeless person's pocket, given them a place to sleep at night, and they wouldn't have to worry about a thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
As for me,
very powerful.
As for me in my house, if I'm being forced at the point of a gun to pay taxes, and if I don't pay taxes, I'll lose my home, I'll lose my children, I'll lose my wife because I'll be in jail. Like, if I have to pay taxes to a government in order to just be free, I'd rather our money go to other Americans than go to
Absolutely.
Ukraine or Israel or anywhere else, for that matter. Take out how Christians feel, take out how Muslims feel, take out how anyone feels.
Hmm.
I'd rather it go to the homeless vets, the vets that kill themselves. 21 of them kill themselves every day. I'd rather go to them. I'd rather go to, a mother of 4 who's homeless in California right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. We're sending too much money overseas. We're sending money to Ukraine. Yeah, these are not our wars. They're not protecting us or making us safer. No matter how much they might try to tell us that it's going to make us safer, but it's all lies if you look into
Mhm.
if you actually pay attention to the history and what's going on.
Well, yeah,
So,
and I know we're wrapping up, but we weren't going
yeah.
to talk about it really. But like
It's a big
the
can of worms. Yeah.
it just made me think about the great Ron Paul talking about blowback to
Yep.
Giuliani. You
Yes.
know, I don't know if that ISIS flag was real on New Year's, where that the soldier from Fort
Oh
Bragg
yeah. Yeah.
drove into all the people and had a gunfight with police.
There's a
I
lot
don't
of
know.
unanswered questions.
I don't
Yeah.
know if that's a real ISIS flag. I don't know if he was really recruited by ISIS, but ISIS would have no reason to want to harm Americans. ISIS would have no reason to want to convert and make our own citizens hurt our people if there wasn't such a thing as blowback.
Exactly.
And you're not supposed to say that, especially as a Republican. You're not supposed to say that, hey, if America is responsible for regime changes all over the Middle East, and that's going to make a younger generation really pissed off a couple years later, it's
Hmm.
going to make them want to do some terrible things to us. But that's just the fact, if we were here living in America, minding our own business, and all of a sudden, we start seeing jets and airplanes and military men in strange camouflage, you know,
Hmm.
stepping on our turf, shooting people and maybe killing bad guys and maybe accidentally killing good guys too and innocent people as well.
Hmm.
You're going to radicalize people,
Yeah.
you
No,
know.
blowback is something that's important to understand. I remember calling. And don't get me wrong, I love Lloyd Smucker. He's a great guy. There's I think he's gotten in with some bad folks in Washington at times because I remember calling his office in 2017 and I asked the staffer if he was familiar with the concept of blowback, and she was like, "Oh yeah, he knows what that is." And but she also, whoever I talked to, she also admitted that he kind of went in as a blank slate in terms of foreign policy. And I was like, "Well, who's he getting advice from?" And the people she mentioned at the time, I don't think these people are still in office, but there was a guy, Elliot Engel, who was on the Armed Forces Committee, and she mentioned his name, and I was like, oh my gosh, that guy's terrible. He's a huge warmonger. So anyway, my point is, anytime I see Lloyd in person, I try to ask him, hey, have you talked to Thomas Massie lately? Because I know he's your buddy. Like, listen to him on foreign policy. Anyway, that was just a little segue. I think we should wrap up, but did you have
Yeah.
any final thoughts? Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned blowback. That's a very important concept when it comes to foreign
Well,
policy. And
yeah,
yeah,
I just think, looking forward in 2025, I have no expectations of the podcast per se, but
mm-hmm,
what I do expect, is that it's going to be a wild one. And
mm-hmm,
there's going to be legal challenges to uh, Trump policies. There's probably going to be a lot of layoffs to the federal
yeah,
government. And I think that's a good thing. And there's going to be legal battles for that. I think this is going to be the year of lawfare. And we thought 2024 was the year of lawfare with Trump and all his court
right.
cases. I don't think we've seen anything yet. Um,
Wow,
I think
yeah,
it's going to be an insane, litigious year with a lot of court cases. There's going to be a lot of Supreme Court cases. This is going to be a very important year. And we just got to hope and hold on that, hopefully the attacks, the attack by ISIS in New Orleans isn't like a show of things to come.
Right. Yeah, I know what you mean. Not a
really
pattern
hope
of
it's
events.
not. I really hope it's not a show of things to come. I really hope this doesn't happen more often.
Yeah.
It worries me because it was pretty quiet for a while.
Sure.
We really didn't have any very many ISIS terrorist attacks in America for a while. It feels like, I don't know why it just feels that way. It feels like it's been a while since this happened.
Yeah, and there's been no real significant protests from the left. Like no way. I mean, I don't want to jinx it, but some people are predicting like lots of like Antifa, riots in the streets because Trump won.
They were saying that like the left is kind of like the guy that killed the CEO of United. Like the left just kind of like pretends to like laugh about it, but they're not pretending. They're happy that dude's dead.
Yeah.
They're happy that dude's dead. And also, tomorrow is January 6th, and we will see if some Democrats are going to say what they said they're going to say too. I just thought about that. Yeah, several Democrats have already said publicly that they're going to challenge Trump's right to become president under the 14th Amendment, which basically says that because Trump committed in treasonous acts, so like causing January 6th is what they say, that he doesn't have the right to be. Yeah, right. He can't become president. So we'll see what tomorrow. We'll see what tomorrow
that's a good
brings.
point. Tomorrow is January 6th.
Tomorrow's January 6th. So we'll see what happens.
Stay tuned. Well, I think that's a wrap for today. I enjoyed our discussion, and I hope everyone out there did. Thanks for listening, and we will be back sometime very soon with some very interesting guests.
Yeah. Stay safe out there. Stay frosty.
Take care, everyone. Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye.